and welcome to another episode of Smaulgld's History of Silver. You can see the other History of Silver series episodes from Smaulgld in the playlist below. So far we've done one on the Roman silver denarius during the period of the Roman Empire and how that coin affected the empire's decline and fall. And also we've done one on silver confiscation in 1934 by the U.S. government. So be sure to check out those two Smaulgld History of Silver episodes. This episode is about Lyndon Johnson's warning on silver back in 1965. And we're going to go through what that warning was, and we're going to show you some charts on how much silver the United States Mint used and what led to the decision not to use it anymore in coins. 550 million ounces of silver were used at the U.S. Mint in 1964 and 1965 to produce 1964 dated dimes, quarters, and half dollars. We're going to put that amount of silver in context. That is approximately 67% of the overall global silver mining production in, say, 2015 or 2016. We have a chart below. I'll show you how that stacks up. But these coins were minted, the dimes, the quarters, and half dollars, by the U.S. Mint, not to sell them to people, but for people to use. And people had silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars in their pockets. They used them and exchanged them at stores, lunch counters, to buy gas. They had them in their pockets. Children saved quarters and dimes and half dollars if they were lucky to get them in coffee cans. And basically there was plenty of silver in circulation in 1963, 1964, because the United States Mint produced an enormous amount of silver in 1960, silver coins in 1964 and 1965. Now, why did they increase that amount? Well, they were planning to take those coins out of circulation, and we'll see what happened. Now, the total face value of the silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars that they minted in 1964 was nearly $1 billion. It was $759 million worth of dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And I broke them down. I actually added them all up. There was about 228 million in dimes, 316 million in quarters, and 214 million in half dollars. So that's about $750 million in change that they minted, dated 1964. Now remember, this is all silver. So all these coins are 90% silver. The other 10% is copper. So if you had 549,000 or 550 million ounces of silver at today's prices, wouldn't be that much money, but it would be more than the face value of that of those coins. Right now that's worth about $8.8 billion at $16 an ounce. So back then it was worth just $750 million, and now it's worth more than 8 times that amount, more than 9 times that amount, because it's worth about $8.8 billion. Now, if you take a look at this chart, this shows you how I came up with those numbers. In 1964, how many coins they minted at the various mints. They were minting coins in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. So they produced over 2 billion dimes, over 1.2 billion quarters, and nearly a half a billion half dollars. And the amount of silver that they used for each of those, they used the bulk of it in quarters, 228 million ounces, 165 million ounces for the dimes, and 155 million ounces for the half dollars, coming up with 550 million ounces of silver use just to produce coins for that 1 year's date. Now, global silver mining production, I've updated these numbers, in 2016 is a little over 850 million ounces. It's been about the same for the past few years. It hit a peak in 2015. It dropped slightly in 2016. But let's take a look at a chart here. In 1963, they produced about a fifth of the silver coinage that they did in 1964. It was still a lot. It was 109 million ounces were used. So if you take the 550 and the 109, you're looking at 660 million ounces produced in just 2 years worth of coinage. But if you go back over 100 years ago and see how much silver they used to use to make coins, not so much. 2 million ounces in 1913. You can comb through these charts. If you go to the website at Smaulgld, you can see them better. You can see the amount of coins that were made in each year, where they were made, which mint they were at, whether they were dimes, quarters, or half dollars. Also, for reference point, a $50 does not have a half an ounce of silver. A quarter does not have a quarter ounce of silver, nor does a dime have 1/10 of an ounce of silver. I've put how much silver is in each of those coins. A dime has 0.07 ounces, and then I multiplied it times the number of dimes they made. A quarter has 0.18 ounces of pure silver in it, multiplied by the number of quarters, and a $50 has 0.361. I think a silver dollar has 0.77 ounces, and then you just multiply that. But they didn't make silver dollars in 1964. They stopped making those with the peace dollar in 1935. But in any event, the purpose of these charts is to show how much silver was used over 100 years ago. And you can see the amount of silver required later on in the 60s was much higher. Now, the years prior to 63, 64, they were using about 50, 60 million ounces. So it had increased with the population, but they were ramping up production in 63, 64, and we'll see why based on what Lyndon Johnson has to say. Now, after 1964, the U.S. removed all silver from its dimes, quarters, half dollars, and they didn't have silver dollars. The half dollars remained 40% silver from 1965 to 1969. But after that, after 1970, all the silver was removed, and silver was not used in any U.S. coins whatsoever other than commemoratives, and really it wasn't used in U.S. coins until 1986 on a large scale when they began production of the American Silver Eagle, which is not 90% silver, which is 99% silver. Well, let's take a look at the U.S. mint silver requirements in 1964 and compare it to, as we just mentioned, the American Silver Eagle silver requirements. So a lot of people got excited in 2015 when the U.S. Mint sold a stunning amount of American Silver Eagles. They sold 47 million. It was a big deal. But, as we just mentioned, U.S. Mint used 549 million ounces of silver in 1964. And not only is that number more than 10 times higher, but the U.S. Mint sold those 47 million American Silver Eagles to collectors and investors, whereas in 1964, those coins were just for everybody to use, and they were your money. In the coin's 30-year history, American Silver Eagles have only sold 577 million. In 30 years, they have about equaled what the U.S. in silver, what the U.S. Mint used just to produce 1964 dated dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And as we mentioned, according to the Silver Institute, global silver mining production in 2016 will be about 877 million. So just the United States. And remember, back in 1964, Canada, Switzerland, Britain, Australia, India, China, all the countries were using silver in their coinage. U.S. stopped in 1964, Canada stopped in 1967. France, I think, stopped a little later in the 60s, same with Switzerland. But for the most part, in 1964, coins were, unless you were from a third world country, Mexico had silver coinage, but unless you were from a third world country and used cheaper metals, the real countries, not the real countries, but the countries with real wealth, substantial industrialized countries, modern countries, had silver as their coinage up until the 60s. Now let's get into what our friend Lyndon Johnson said about silver coins in 1964. In early 1965, the United States decided they were no longer going to make the coins of silver. John Kennedy had decided in 1963 and 1962, he'd addressed Congress and he said, look, silver needs to be demonetized and we want to eventually call on the silver certificates. Silver should be used for industry, not for money. There's no reason for silver to be money. We'll do another podcast on that in the history of silver and how John Kennedy demonetized silver. There's a big myth out there that somehow John Kennedy was a fan of sound money. He wasn't. He preferred Federal Reserve notes. But we're not going to get into that right now. What we're going to talk about is how this plan finally started to come to fruition in 1965 when the United States decided to remove silver from the coins, and also by 1968 they had removed the convertibility of the silver certificate for silver. But let's get to what Lyndon Johnson said when he signed the act in a statement taking the silver out of the coins. He said, at present, silver coins won't disappear. They won't even become rarities. We estimate now there are 12 billion, I repeat, more than 12 billion silver dimes, he said, and quarters and half dollars that are now outstanding. We will make another billion before we halt production. So they were making these coins through 1965, dated 1964, but made out of 90% silver. And they'll be used side by side with our coins. Since the life of a silver coin is about 25 years, we expect our traditional silver coins to be with us in large numbers for a long, long time. So Lyndon Johnson was saying, look, all these silver coins are out there. There's no benefit in separating them. A quarter is a quarter, whether it's made of silver or the ones that we're now making out of copper and nickel in 1965. And then he gave his warning. If anybody has any idea of hoarding our silver coins, let me say this. Treasury has a lot of silver on hand, and it can be and it will be used to keep the price of silver in line with its value in our present coins. There will be no profit in holding them out of circulation for the value of their silver content. Whoa, that he's basically saying, look, the United States, the Treasury at the time had a strategic silver stockpile that they would use to make sure that the value of a quarter was only a quarter in terms of how much silver had in it. And if people started taking them out of circulation, they would flood the market with silver to make sure that hoarders would not be rewarded for hoarding. Well, that didn't stop anybody, because everyone knew that silver was, not everyone, but the people that were smart at the time started taking the silver coins out of circulation and hoarding them. And if you had a pile of quarters, kids would do this. They'd separate the silver ones and they'd use the other ones in circulation, or they bring them to the bank in rolls and get dollar bills for them. So it's kind of prophetic when, or maybe pathetic for Lyndon Johnson to say there'll be no profit in holding them out of circulation, as we just saw that the face value of these coins is more than 10 times what they are, what their face value is in silver content. Now, right now, you can buy what they call junk silver. Now, you could buy these 90% silver coins, and if you're interested in buying yourself a pile of these coins, you can. They currently cost about $12, $13, $14 per face value of the coins. You buy them by face value, not by ounces. And if you're interested in buying some, you can buy them through the links that I have below this podcast, or you can buy them from the website, through the website, to the affiliated gold and silver bullion dealers. And if you do so, I'm not advising you to do so, but if you want to pick up some junk silver just to have or to invest in, it's not investment advice, but if you do so, Smaulgld gets a small commission. And if you do so through the site, you can compare 4 different gold and silver dealers and check out their pricing and shipping and the availability of products. And you can get dimes, quarters, half dollars, and even silver dollars like this one over here. So Lyndon Johnson warned everyone, don't hoard the silver, and they hoarded the silver. And those that did hoard the silver in 1964 were smart, and they now have a valuable, if they had just kept the, if they had taken Johnson's advice and used the others interchangeably, they would have lost out on a 12, 13 time gain. Well, thank you very much for listening. The next time we talk, I think I will have the Chinese gold reserves out early this month in January 2016. Please remember to subscribe to this channel and also to subscribe to Smaulgld. Thank you.